Today we've got an exciting cheap versus expensive comparison. Today we're going to be looking at amplifiers, cheap versus expensive, what you get for your money, so stay tuned. Hey, you're watching Alamo Music TV. My name is Chris McKee.
And I'm Cooper Greenberg.
We're here with Alamo Music Center in San Antonio, Texas. You can find us online at alamomusic.com. If you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe, turn on notifications, like our videos. If you'd like to support the channel, visit our spring store for our swag, customized t-shirts and whatnot. So Cooper, you've been doing a bunch of cheap versus expensive stuff, mostly on guitars, and I had the idea, we need to do this on amps.
We have to, because there's a huge range when it comes to what you get for your money.
There is, and this is really kind of touching, just barely getting to the surface of the subject. So I think there's more of these to come that'll be fun. And I've done this in my own personal life. You probably have too, right?
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of difference. Today we're looking at two Fender amps. This is the Big Daddy, the classic Blues Junior that so many people love.
It's amazing. Yeah, it's a great amp. And then we got the Mustang LT25, which also so many people love. Probably one of the top selling amps across the board, you know.
Yeah, it's a lot of bang for the buck.
Yeah.
And so this is a good comparison. Tell me why you said we should look at these two.
Well, there's a few different things that make these very different. Obviously, this is tube versus solid state. And I think it's almost counterintuitive because you can almost, I think if you're looking at it very basically, you can kind of do less with this one. This one has a lot more sounds built in, but this one probably has a little more sound quality. So I think it's a little more nuanced than just like a cheap versus expensive acoustic guitar, you know, because the format is very similar. It's just a little differences in usually manufacturing locations.
Huge price difference.
Yeah.
Totally different types of amps.
Yeah.
Can I make a terrible metaphor?
Do it.
All right. High-end restaurant, fantastic meal. Las Vegas, $2.99 all-you-can-eat buffet.
That's a good call. I'll even go so far as to say this is like a prefix menu, like the chef's choosing what you're gonna get. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You can maybe very little substitutions. You know, if you got a shellfish allergy, if you're keeping kosher,
You should not eat.
Yeah, you probably but the thing is, so we often get to see kind of across the board in different classes and categories of instruments, what's the top selling, you know, across the country, you know. So the LT25 we have sold so many of, LT50 as well, but you know, a lot of people love the Champion amps.
Yep.
Champion 20, Champion 40, those are also solid state that capture different sort of modeling, some effects and stuff.
Have some digital effects on them, yeah.
But this is really pushing that into like, this is a modeling amp. This is not just...
This is the most modern interpretation of that, where you've got all of the digital effects, app integration, Bluetooth stuff, Wi-Fi updates, all of that stuff.
So you can see on here, obviously we'll have some photos that, you know, the B-roll in there, but you got a little screen on top. You got some kind of little navigation knob that you can press in. You can build sounds.
They have those in BMWs too.
Yeah, it's basically a BMW for, you know, $149 or whatever it is right now.
It's like $179.
But yeah, so the LT25, it comes loaded with presets. So as you'll see in the demo, we can talk a little bit more before we get there, but it starts off with Fender clean sound, which I think is probably the most important when you're dealing with Fender amps.
That's what they're famous for.
Because, you know, you're really getting it for the clean and then you can add on. But basically, you can find a preset and you can customize it within there. You can change the amp that it's modeling from a Twin, Princeton, and then all the way through Metal 2000 and alt metal. Add pedals, add compression, add reverb.
Yeah.
So it's, you know, it's very fun to mess around with, and like we've talked about with multi-effects processors, good way to get your feet wet with, you know, building sounds, messing around with effects, and really knowing what all those words mean and what they do. You know?
It's a very low barrier to experimentation with the guitar and different effects.
Yeah.
And none of those standalone effects are going to be good as a separate pedal, arguably. And the presets are pretty spot on. I say this with everything, whether it's a high-end Strymon pedal or you know, a digital amp. The presets are a starting point, and I think, you know, the magic is really experimenting with that. But you have a lot of options with this one.
Yeah.
Now, it's an LT25 because it's 25 watts.
Yes.
Small package, wood cabinet, 8-inch speaker, and it's all solid state.
Yeah.
You can hook up Bluetooth to it, so you can stream music from your phone and play with it like a backing track. It integrates with their app, doesn't it? So you can switch it on the amp or on your app. Mm-hmm. That's fun to say.
Amp and amp.
Yeah.
Tap tempo for your delays. It's got a tuner built in. So it's nice, kind of all-in-one package, especially a lot of people come into the store, they buy their first electric guitar, they need to have an amp.
And there's foot switch functionality.
Yes.
So you can buy the different foot switches and be able to
you can
switch
do
it on the
you
phone.
know, but
and looping too, doesn't it have looping?
I'm not sure if this one does.
Don't hold me accountable to that, yeah.
I'm not sure if it does. But say you bought a Squier Affinity, maybe you bought a Player, something that's, you know, an entry-level electric guitar. Oftentimes this is the best place to go because you really need to experiment and learn everything about forming your tone and, you know, experimenting all that. And instead of buying something like this and then 30 different pedals, it's a lot easier to get there.
The other thing I really like about this amp, and amps kind of in this category that are solid state, is that they have the parent saver or the apartment lease saver, which is basically just a headphone jack. Yeah. So this is almost like, it's like tabletop amp size.
Yeah.
And you can plug in headphones and have all the benefits of the other functionality, whether it's muted to the rest of the world or, you know, you've got the speaker going. So I think that's a lot of flexibility that's in this amp, and for less than $200.
Yeah, it's awesome. And if you love it, but you want a little bit more, LT50, get a little bit bigger.
Yeah, so the functionality pretty much stays the same.
Yeah.
You've indoctrinated yourself into kind of that, how that works, and you can just kind of move and still have that familiarity with it.
Yeah, but then you got something else over here.
I owned one of these. Have you ever had one?
No, I went straight to the hot rod, but it's basically...
Well, this is a hot rod, but you
I
went to the
went
bigger
straight
hot
to
rod.
the deluxe, yeah.
Yes.
But this is...
Excuse me.
Watch out. It's because Maurice, he talked me into it.
So you hurt your back, got it.
Yeah. But yeah, this is, like Chris said, it is in the hot rod line, which is the Pro Junior, the Blues Junior, the Hot Rod Deluxe, which we always use on our demos, and then the DeVille, which is the 410 big version that Andrea has that nobody needs.
You know what's fun about those is they've switched the handles on them, but it used to be a rubber dog bone style handle, and the DeVilles are so heavy that if you picked it up by the handle, you could feel the handle stretch in your hand.
Yeah, that's not
and
a good
we
time.
replaced so many of those handles. So funny.
Yeah, my hot rod still has that.
Yeah, but it's not quite as heavy.
It's not that bad.
So,
but I mean, this is a heavy duty amp, and this is a 15 watt amp. This is a 25 watt amp, but it's such a different thing when it comes to tube wattage versus solid state.
Tube wattage is a different deal altogether, that's for sure. That's why when solid state amps, like even the Tone Masters that are supposed to be a digital version of a tube amp, when they try to replicate that power, they have to go way over when it comes to the wattage.
Yeah, all the tube amps have basically been unavailable for us for quite a long time. So that's another good reason to kind of show off, because it's nice to get reacquainted with how nice Fender tube amps are. But we've done Pro Junior video in the last year. We did Why You Need a Small Amp, which was fun. But this is, I think, right in the perfect spot between almost way too loud with the Deluxe and maybe not loud enough to fill a small venue like the Pro Junior. It's a really nice place to be.
It's interesting. The Deluxe is, or I think it still is, it has been the #1 backline amp in the world. So what that means is it's the amp that's most commonly sitting off stage, you know, handling stuff for, you know, bands that are playing around the world. I know a bunch of cats that use the Pro Tube amp for basically that, because they crank it all the way and they just want that saturation at the lower volume. But unless you have it mic'd up and it's going through a PA system, it cannot compete. And this does kind of bridge that gap.
Yeah.
I've had this on stage when I owned one, sitting behind me. It was mic'd, but I had to keep the volume very low because it could overwhelm everything very, very quickly.
Yeah, and the other thing, I'm glad that you brought that up with the Pro Junior. That's a tiny amp that you can really push into some nice natural tube overdrive because it's that small.
Right, and it's a single channel amp.
Yes.
It's basically got 2 knobs, right? Yeah, it's tone and volume.
It's tone and volume,
It's
which
like-
is awesome.
Which is like really the killer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Hot Rod Deluxe has a separate channel for overdrive. This is a nice in-between with that fat switch. So talk
Well,
about
fat switch and master. So
Yeah.
where this bridges the gap between the Pro Junior and the Deluxe really is that this is technically a single channel amp like the Pro Junior. It's not a 2-channel amp like the Deluxe, but you have a master volume on here that you don't have on the Pro Junior that kind of gives you that functionality, and you have a fat switch which beefs up the whole signal chain. And so what you can do on this amp is between those two things, either with the fat switch or without it, you can crank your volume, keep your main volume down, and then you've got all of that saturation. And that's how 2-stage amps work. You just don't have the switching back and forth between clean and dirty, so to speak. You can turn the fat switch on and off.
Yeah.
And that's how I used to use mine. I kind of set mine up. Well, and I tend to use 2-channel amps like single-channel amps anyway. I'll just turn down if I want to clean it up. But you could turn off the fat switch and kind of have that special setting. There's so many fans of these amps on the internet that you can very quickly see what people's preferred settings are and dial in something really, really nice. And with the latest iteration of these, they respond even better, take pedals really, really well. They're just a fantastic amp.
Yeah. It's a really nice sweet spot, and I want to talk a little bit about how I approach the comparison before we get into it, because like we said, there's, I think, 50 in-box presets on here, and then spots where you can create your own and save your own. But I think going through the presets is for another video, because obviously this does not have a phaser, a flanger, digital delay, analog delay. It doesn't have any of that stuff.
But it costs more, Cooper.
It costs more. Well,
So
we
why
could
does it
talk
cost
about
so much more?
We could talk about that. But I think this will be for a different video to go into the presets, which luckily we have some people in-house that are really getting to know the presets, so hopefully that'll come out soon. But what I wanted to do is just dial in as close of a clean tone to this as I could. So they don't have Blues Junior preset in here, but they do have Princeton. I tried to use that and tailor it to a sort of Blues Junior
Similar
sound.
size.
Yeah. And then just a kiss of reverb that I put, I think, at 3.5, and then tried to match it over here. Like no stomp boxes or effects or anything, but I kept the EQs pointed straight up, just like I did over here. So we got pure clean tone, and then we did what we're talking about. We master controlled and cranked up the channel to try and get some of that natural distortion. And then over here, I kind of did the same thing, but you have to dial in a little bit of the overdrive.
Right.
I kept it pretty low and transparent, and then just cranked the gain over here. That's my best approximation, and I think that obviously you'll hear some differences, but I think that's what you can do over here if you long for this tone, but you're playing on the Mustang. But let's check it out.
All right, let's see if he did a good job. Okay, and so now the video has a new title of how can you, as close as possible, get an LT25 to try to sound like a Blues Junior, and did you accomplish your task?
No.
So they both sound pretty good.
Yeah.
To your ears, does this measure up to the sound of this for less than $200?
So the snob in me says absolutely not. But I will say that there are inherent hindrances from, say, a solid state amp that's this size to try and match up to the wide spectrum of chimey bell-like tone.
Would it happen to be anything to do with the fact that there's 4 inches less of speaker?
That could be it. Honestly, that I know that contributes as well. You know, but the thing is, I play this sometimes in the store. We like to use it a lot for demoing guitars when somebody comes in, because instead of getting out a bunch of pedals, somebody wants overdrive, distortion, anything like that. It's easy to dial that in and hear the true tone of the pickups come through. And I do think that playing on the clean tone, it lets the guitar shine. It doesn't color the tone too much unless you really want it to, and then you can make it happen.
Right.
It sounds a little muffled in my eye, and in my ear, I guess. It looks muffled too, but no, it's a little bit of that solid.
Size does matter?
Yeah, size does matter. It's a little of that solid state sound.
Like this compressed kind of tone.
And I think that the only way that a solid
the
state...
wrong kind of compression.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the only solid state amp that I think has been able to get close to the tube tone is the Tone Master. But that's because all the processing...
Yeah, it has...
goes towards...
1,000% more processing power.
And it goes towards muddling one sound.
Yeah.
The thing is with the Blues Junior is that it is the epitome of the Fender clean tone. It sounds like every part of the EQ spectrum comes through better on here, but that's because it's the analog tube.
There's natural harmonics coming through.
I mean, it's a whole different beast.
I kind of miss owning one, actually, as I sit here. You know, it's a classic tube amp that's set up for this wattage. It's EL84s, which work at this kind of wattage setting. It's got a great preamp section, 312 AX7s, I think. And you can just really get, without anything else, to me, here's the test of an amp. Without pedals, can it sound really, really fantastic? And I think that's what this accomplishes. To your point, you get these natural harmonics, which all equate to this bigger sound. The speaker is bigger. It's 12 inches. It's driving, pushing more air. It's an open back versus a closed back, too, so that changes the sound a lot. But the biggest thing is that the compression that you get in a tube amp is different. It's this squishiness. It doesn't take and like all of your sound and just squash it down.
Yeah.
And you know, when I thought of this video, part of it was listening to a demo of a new solid state amp coming out and going, yeah, it sounds like a typical small solid state amp. There's almost this kind of compressed buzziness that you get.
And I think that if you were going to try to get close to a tube sound on a solid state amp, which there's some incredible solid state amps out there, not just the Tone Master, but there's, I mean, really great stuff.
Well, processing units and floor units, all sorts of stuff.
The thing is, if you're going to get into something like that, you're going to pay close to or more than
way
this
more.
amp. I mean, you can't find, this is currently $749, which is crazy because I think I bought my hot rod for $699.
I bought my Blues Junior back at Wynn for like $549.
That's crazy. It's worth it though. I mean, with what's every price is going up, so I still think this has great value.
Well, I bought mine like 8 years ago. So.
But the solid state emulators that you can get that emulate tube amps are $1,000 or more. No, I mean nothing any less than $1,000, I don't think. But it's easy to be like, yeah, of course, this is a tube amp. This is better, which it's true. But this is probably a perfect tool for a completely different player that will most likely graduate to something like this down the road. And they both have great value to a completely different player, I think. You know? So
we talked at the very beginning of the video, and I think this is a good takeaway. This is where we said both of us have done this personally. What was your first amp was like a Line 6, right?
No, I was jealous of the Line 6.
You were jealous of the Line 6?
I had, it was basically like a Frontman. I forget what it was called at the time, but it was a small Fender solid state amp.
The even less expensive version of this.
Yeah, it was total entry level. Yeah, but it did what it needed to do. All right,
Yeah.
it's cool. Yeah.
So I had a similar experience. I had a few different very solid state amps. Back in high school, I had a Park. I don't know if you ever saw those.
Yes.
Those are the cheap Marshalls.
Yeah, the long P. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. I had a Park. I had a Crate. And then I had some Fender Champions.
Mm-hmm.
I had a Fender, what was the one? It was like a Champion with tubes. It was a Super Champ.
Mm-hmm.
I had a Super Champ,
Yeah.
which was cool. I think they've discontinued it, but it was kind of solid state effects with tube. And then I got a Blues Junior. And then I went even bigger. And here was the realization is at some point you have really nice guitars and you get pedals and all of these things, and then you turn around and you've got an amp that might be good enough, but when you upgrade, I went from a, say, $500, $600 Blues Junior, whatever they cost now, to almost $3,000 amp, and the difference was noticeable.
Yeah.
Even though they're both tube at that point. And so I think there's that old adage that you kind of get what you pay for. And the realization for me was that the amp is as much of a musical instrument as your guitar. There is the truth of kind of diminishing returns at some point as you go up, but this is a great comparison because between about $500 of difference here, there's substantial tone difference.
Yeah,
I wonder if it translates with the compression on YouTube, but it's certainly in the room.
I hope it does. I think one of the biggest things is so I associate solid state with bright, almost like crunchy digital sound. This amp is noticeably brighter to me, but it's like the good kind of bright. It's all
not shrill.
The
rounded.
Beautiful high end, that chiminess that we're talking about. This, it's almost like, and other times that I've played it, I've had to crank the treble to get it up to like what you want to say. I used the Les Paul on this one, but say you're playing a Fender Strat and you're in the bridge position. On this, it's gonna knock you back in a good way. And this, it's almost like it needs the extra push to get that bridge sound out. And then when you go to the neck position, I mean, it's like, is this underwater, dude?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? No, but I do think that this is a good way to learn, and then you can, down the road, graduate to something like this. And if you're Chris McKee, you have to graduate from this to a Mesa Boogie.
So that you can be better.
But
because that's the old trap. Once I buy that, I'll be better.
Yeah. But I do think, and I will say, Hot Rod Deluxe, Blues Junior, either way, this could sustain you forever.
And you can gig with either of these amps.
Yeah.
You could never gig with this. There are some solid states that are bigger that you could potentially gig with. But what's interesting about this is you could have a very expensive tube amp and then still want something for home that's not.
Yeah, for sure.
Or you're like Rhett Schull and you just have a stack of very expensive amp heads.
Yeah,
so,
whatever. But yeah, I mean, obviously the differences are there, but the good part about the cheap versus expensive, or affordable versus you got to save up for it, usually it comes down to they're both really good for a different person.
Yeah, it just depends.
So,
so we don't begrudge either of these. They're both fantastic amps. I think you get what you pay for, but there's definitely certain applications for both of these. And I think that this is, like I said, there's a lot more that we could cover in this category. So I'm curious from you what you'd like to see in a comparison of amps, cheap versus expensive, because we could do cheap versus expensive tube amps. We could do cheap versus expensive modeling amps, because all of this exists within this category, and there's great use cases for any of them. So let us know in the comments below, and if you want to see those videos, make sure that you are subscribed. If you don't already subscribe, hit the like button and continue to follow us. At the end of the day, what's the best amp in the world, Cooper?
It's whatever one that you're getting next in Chris McKee's mind, because he's trying to bring some stuff in here that nobody can afford, you know what I'm saying?
So good. Such good stuff. Years ago on this channel, I did, I think it's the Custom 64 Deluxe that they've got. It's basically a boutique hand-wired amp that Fender makes. And I don't have one of those amps still. I would love to own one of those amps. There's certain amps you just get in and it's like,
blows your mind.
It is.
That new Pro Reverb was amazing.
And that's my point. They are just as much of an instrument. And so if you don't have a good amp, so I'm talking to some of you guys out there. Look, if you've gotten a bunch of really nice electric guitars, and you are still playing through a pretty inexpensive amp, just do yourself a favor, do some research, listen to some things online, go into a store, take your guitars, try them out in different amps, and see what I mean. Your mind will be blown.
Yeah.
So that's all we have for you today. Thanks so much for watching. Stay tuned. We'll see you next time.